And joining us in studio right now is old friend John Hanlon. We also have Foster joining us, who is an expert in Windows phones, if you will. I mean, give us the overall on this phone.
Yeah, so it's the Nokia Lumia Icon. It is the latest Windows phone device. And for a while, like you said, there's always been this debate between Android and iOS, which are definitely the leaders in the mobile smartphone market. But then Windows Phone has always been kind of there. And for a while now, the hardware has been lagging on their devices. So there's a few disadvantages to Windows Phone. They never have had, and they still don't have the amount of apps that you're going to get with the iPhone, with iOS, and with Android. So that's one big disadvantage. But now with the icon, the Nokia Lumia Icon, which I have here, they have really upped the hardware, and it's really on par with any Android device or the iPhone. I personally have the Galaxy S4 as an Android phone that I have. I think it's probably the best Android phone on the market right now, but I actually like the display on the Icon better than the S4 display.
And why is that? Like, what's different about it?
Just the coloring is better, I think, and it works really well. The screen with Windows Phone, which is very, very different from Android and iOS. Compared to Windows Phone, Android and iOS function very similarly because they have the icons that are the apps. There are a lot of differences once you get into it, but if you just glance at it, they're kind of similar. Windows Phone is very different. It has what are called live tiles, which is like your home screen. And instead of little circle apps and pages that you go through, it's kind of a never-ending stream of boxes which flip and give you notifications and display different information right on there. But it's very different looking than what you're going to get with Android or iOS. So when you first pick it up, there's a big difference, and there are a lot of differences in there compared to if you're coming from Android or iOS.
Yeah, and when you're playing with Windows 8, and again, I'm a relatively new user because it came on the laptop that I got, but you have these, which I don't even use, the tiled home screen, like ever. Very rarely do I ever, and one of my biggest annoyances is that I have to actually go to it to basically access the start menu. I know they're working on that, and there's some apps that kind of make the start menu out there, but I just create shortcuts on the desktop for everything now, and that's just how I get things done. But it looks different, but it's not what I would call unfamiliar, because instead of the icons for the apps, you just have these tiles.
Sure.
And as long as you've got them organized the way that you want them to organize, that's pretty good. And the tiles, to me anyway, seem more flexible than the apps. You know how in the Android you're always downloading an app to make sure you can make 4 icons in one icon space. That way you can fit more stuff on a screen. Yeah. You really don't have to do that with Windows. You can kind of just adjust the size of the icons.
Right. And a lot of it is just getting used to whatever you prefer. I always say go in, try it out, see what you like best. But Windows Phone is definitely different. And you have the tiles, which are kind of this never-ending home screen. If you want to, you can just keep lining them up. But of course, you also have a list, just like with Android or iOS, where not necessarily with iOS, but similar to Android, where you can go into all of your applications and you can browse them alphabetically. But it's basically just 2 pages. You've got the list of all of your applications, and you've got what's basically the home screen.
It's like an infinite scroll. Right. So you're on a website. Instead of clicking the next page, it just keeps loading new stuff. Now, Foster, what one of the reasons we brought you in here is you're a longtime Windows Phone user.
Right. I had it for about 2 years, from 2010 to late 2012.
Okay. So, I mean, John's not. I'm not. Relatively new to Windows 8, but you're the Windows Phone guy. And there's always this, I hear from some people who use Windows phones that just absolutely love them, and then I hear from other people who just absolutely hate them. They give the phone back after a month. They don't want to deal with it ever again. So kind of explain your experience with a Windows Phone.
Well, one nice thing about it is, even though the start screen is very different, it's easier to use in the winter because larger buttons. So if you have less motor control, that's nice. It has a faster interface. The contrast is brilliant. It's great for someone who's going from a flip phone to smartphone because there's not as many options. If you need to learn how to do something, you can look up a tutorial online, and pretty much all the phones work the same. Whereas with Android, you have lots of different flavors out there,
right,
which can be confusing. So you have that. The apps market is pretty weak, but as far as like Facebook, all your basic stuff that most people need, you've got that. It's great for taking pictures. You don't have to unlock the phone. Just hold down the camera button for 2 seconds, and you're ready to take pictures, even if you have a password.
Okay, so just access that camera really fast.
Real fast.
Which is a big deal with these Nokia Lumias because they always are kind of advertising their camera. And obviously the first one that I was wrong about, we're not talking about that one. Parents are fighting each other, the big 40 some odd megapixel.
The 1020 is the name of that one.
Now, that's not what this phone is, but this phone still does tout its HD capability, but it also touts its audio ability. So kind of explain that.
Right, and one thing worth noting, Foster mentioned the photo capture button on the Icon. So it actually has a physical photo snap button.
Thank God.
Which not very many, or certainly most Android, the iPhone doesn't have that. Most Android phones don't have that, which is kind of interesting in that you can, like you said, you just hold down the camera button from any screen, and it will open up the camera. Even when the phone is off, if you hold down the camera button, it'll open up the camera.
Okay.
Which is cool, but there's also very similar functions like that. I brought in the Moto X a while back, which is you just twist your wrist, and it actually opens up the camera. So, in my opinion, that's a little easier than actually holding down a button. With the S4, I've got a button right on my home screen that I just pull up for the camera. So this is pretty cool, and it does have those physical buttons. I think the way the buttons are laid out on the phone is a little strange. So the power button is actually in the middle of the volume button and the camera one, which can get a little confusing because normally on most phones, like the S4, the power button is up on the top, and that's the only button on the whole side. But here you've got 3 separate physical buttons. So it just depends on what you like. I think at first, if you're coming from an Android phone, you might be a little confused by those physical buttons. But
okay.
But it's interesting.
Now, it's a sharp-looking phone. And, I mean, one of the things that, we look at with phone design is kind of some of the new trends. And what I have seen is that there appears to be a shift away from the rounded corners bit to more of a sharp corner. And these are kind of like a squared phone. It's just much more square than we're typically getting. Do you see that as being the design trend here?
Windows Metro has definitely pushed that. And now it's called Modern App. But, yeah, you've noticed that on websites a lot, too, right?
Yeah.
The rounded corners going away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on the manufacturer. Samsung, with all of their phones, are still rounded corners, whereas Motorola...
They're doing that just because of Apple, I think. They're just messing with Apple a little bit on that. But
whereas we see with Nokia here and Motorola and HTC, they're definitely going from the more square look. And this Icon is actually pretty heavy. You definitely feel it in your hands. It's not like the iPhone where it's super light. It's got a little bit of a thickness. It's pretty heavy.
Now, this is a very similar size and design to the other Nokia Lumias. And one of the things that we've always talked about when we have John in here is the thing that sells iPhones are the ability to accessorize the bejesus out of them. And the only reason I have it is because my company, we sell these cases that have the built-in knives and everything on them, and people see that and they go absolutely bonkers. I can't get that for anything else. There's no standard. The phone changes in size every 3 or 6 months. So is Nokia attempting to have a more uniform size here? Now, they appear to be a little bit different in size, but do you think that they're actually going to finally do that? We're going to have some kind of a standard?
I don't think I have seen that so much. Certainly not anything like the iPhone, that it's basically they have one product, and even the different variations are pretty much the same physical product. And that is one of the complaints with Android, and it's not just the physical side of it, but also actually in the OS and how you use the phone. You pick up one Android phone and it works completely different than another Android phone. But I have not seen that from Nokia. I don't know, Foster, have you? It doesn't appear to me that they are trying to set the standard.
I think that a lot of the manufacturers, it's going to become a lot less radical, but each generation is still going to be physically different enough that, you're not going to be
You're still not going to have those.
Because like the S...
drives me nuts.
Yeah, like the S5 is supposed to be 1/10 of an inch larger.
Okay.
So
everything is Android and even Windows, I guess what they're doing is, okay, we are different than the other guys. That's why you want to come to us. Whereas Apple's strong suit is, we're uniform. We're going to be this way for 2 or 3 years, and you're not going to have to worry about any changes.
Right. There's so many options out there that they're always looking for and sometimes it's a crazy feature, but what can we do here that will set us apart from all the other competition? So sometimes manufacturers are competing with themselves. There are however many Samsung Android phones available for each carrier right now.
Okay.
And they're always looking to add that, so you've got all these different sizes.
Okay, so in just a couple of minutes, when we come back with Foster and John, we're going to talk about whether or not Foster has abandoned Windows phones, and we're going to go over a couple of maybe the more unique features that this particular phone has, in case you guys want to go ahead and check it out. And as far as Windows 8, I know a lot of people talk about Windows 8 just being, designed for the touch screen, and it primarily is, but For me, it seems to work just fine for the laptop, but you have to use it in a little bit of a different way. But there is the flexibility to do it. So if you're not comfortable with just automatically going to a new system, always go into a store and play around with the different technology so you can figure out which one's right for you. We'll be back with John Hanlon and Foster here in just a couple of minutes on News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. We've got our buddy John Hanlon, tech guy, bringing in those phones. We bring him in on a regular basis. I know he's been on a hiatus, but they had the whole holiday season the phone manufacturers had to get through. So we got John Hanlon with us, and he's brought a buddy, Foster, who is a Windows Phone user. And what's interesting, though, Foster, you told me you've kind of abandoned Windows phones, but are you considering going back? Is that what's happening? And why did you abandon them to begin with?
Well, I was getting sick of not having any apps that were also, yeah. And then all the newer Android phones had the latest and greatest hardware. The current gen Windows phones were always about a year or so behind in hardware. Mm-hmm. At that time, there was also none that supported 4G, and I wanted 4G. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. Another couple years as it continues to mature. It sounds like starting next year, there's going to be a lot more apps, partly because of Microsoft owning Nokia. And also Microsoft is starting to play around with creating Android phones with Nokia, which means better app support, hopefully, in the Microsoft App Store as well.
Sure. And now, John, I guess going to this phone, the Nokia Lumia Icon, have some of his concerns on why he left Windows Phones been addressed in this new lineup?
Certainly, the hardware issues, I don't know if it's specifically hardware. I was talking with Foster earlier, and he said that they've been lagging, which is what I saw too. Windows Phone has always been lagging behind Android and iOS just with hardware and the quality of the camera, quality of the screens, and that type of thing, which, like I mentioned earlier, I think this is up to par with those. But the issues of apps, I don't think has been fixed yet. For example, there is no Gmail app, there is no YouTube app because those are Google.
Right.
So you have to use a third-party YouTube app if you want it to watch, or just go or do it through the browser. But either way, that's a hassle because you're relying then on a third party, and those will never work as good as something Google will put out there. So YouTube is a mainstream app that I think everybody uses on their phone. But with Windows Phone, you're not going to have a really good experience with that. And there's of course an email application, but if you use Gmail like a lot of people do, I do all the time personally as it's my primary email, then it does not work very well with Gmail.
Okay.
You're just not going to get a lot of the features that you're used to with Gmail. You're not going to get it on here. So I think those are still legitimate concerns.
But hardware-wise, this phone is up to par with Apple and Android right now. I mean, this is
absolutely.
You guys have been saying this is a really good phone. As somebody in radio, when I look at their audio quality on the website and they're demonstrating the microphones that they have in this particular phone, that appeals to me. The HD video, and I think what Nokia is doing with the camera thing, they're going for more of the artsy crowd. I think people are going to be concerned about audio and video and picture quality and maybe try to corner a market there.
Sure.
And possibly steal them away.
Yeah, Nokia has done a really good job with the camera side of it. There are several applications, separate camera applications. Well, they work together with the camera on the phone for things like panorama and various features and editing tools that is better on the Icon than what I've seen on any other smartphone.
And of course, Windows is starting to really embrace 3D printing. So they've got that new 3D printing app, and I know that there's Android and Apple 3D printing apps as well, but those are third party. All right, so we got to go to the phone lines here. We have Scott. Scott, welcome to the program, man. What's up?
Hey, thank you. Just a couple questions. One, I've heard that because the Windows 8.1 was a little unpopular at the start, that it might become free. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And so I was wondering if that talk was also the same for the Nokia, or at least for the phone app or the phone version of 8.1, if they were thinking about making that free as well, kind of like how Android does it. The second question was, in a corporate environment, what ways can you lock down the phone? With BlackBerry, the greatest thing about BlackBerry was the BES server. But after Android and iPhone took over, there was a lot of services that made that type of security very difficult. Does Windows, do they have a solution for the corporate world?
Guys?
Well, okay. If you're talking about data encryption, 8.1 update is going to bring VPN support. And then if you use a service like private internet access, it'll be perfectly safe to do mobile web banking and stuff
Okay.
like that. That's one thing you really shouldn't do with a vanilla phone because anyone could be looking at your packets and get in.
Vanilla meaning just the base without additions added to it, the operating system.
Right, without any extra security.
Got it. And I'm sorry, what was the other question again, Scott?
The other one was whether or not they were going to make 8.1 free. I've been hearing and seeing reports that because of the unpopularness of the operating system, that they were actually going to release a free version. And I didn't know if the phone version of 8 or 8.1 was going to be included in that.
Okay, so are they looking at making it a free? Now, we've heard this going all the way back to the fight against, Linux and everything else, that Windows was going to finally release as free, focus on the server and the support side of things. And so it looks like that rumor's floating around again. Is there any credence to it this time around?
There's a lot more weight to it. It still is very early on to say what's going to happen, but Microsoft does feel threatened, and they're seeing that other companies are making money while being reasonable, and they know they're going to be left out if they don't do that. You've also got Ubuntu phones coming out soon.
Which is going to be, there's going to be a huge loyalty market there.
Mm-hmm. So they've got to change their business model.
Okay. And I would assume, Scott, if they've got to change their business model for that, the phones are certainly going to be a part of it.
Yeah, I hope so.
Everybody wants something for free.
Exactly. Look at Android. Look how fast that took over just because it was part of the free market.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, I hope we answered your questions, man. Do appreciate the call.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so it's that would be interesting if we start seeing those free operating systems floating around out there. Of course, that gives the, if you release the development kit, then you have the third-party marketplace that will be able to, again, fill those voids with the apps. And that was one of the great things that Google did is just, here, take it. It's free.
Right.
Run with it.
It was always a great thing, but then that's been one of the long-standing complaints about Android is just because it's free, Google puts out Android for free, so basically it doesn't cost the manufacturers anything to put it on their phones, which is great, except that then you have all of these different experiences.
Right.
Every manufacturer, every carrier changes Android based on the device just because Android is basically just out there for anybody to use. So unlike iOS, Apple completely controls iOS. Every iOS experience is the same and controlled by Apple. Basically, manufacturers can do anything they want with Android, and they do. So when you pick up an S4, it functions, though it's the same operating system, it functions very differently than if you picked up a phone that was a year old or an HTC, like the HTC One that came out about the same time. But that's very different because Samsung with the S4 and HTC with the HTC One have changed the operating system so much.
So maybe there would be a market there for not Apple, but for Microsoft to go, okay, Apple kept everything in-house. Android took everything out-of-house. Maybe we come right in the middle here and make everybody happy. Might take them a few years to get there, but if they approach it properly, they could have an opportunity there. So this particular phone, which is the Nokia Lumia Icon, not Nikon. Sorry, my wife's a photographer. Icon. Tell us some of the best features about this phone and some of its shortcomings, obviously besides the apps and that sort of thing.
Right. So it does have a full HD display, so 1080 HD, which the displays these days are hard to compare because they're all so good. Usually when I come in here, I say this display is amazing, which they are going forward with the iPhone, with Android phones, with Windows Phone devices. They've gotten to the point where they're all really, really good. So this is a full HD display. I said earlier that I think it's better than the S4. I think it is better than the S4. The display, the coloring is just amazing. It has that physical camera button, which we talked about a little bit. That if you're into that and you take a lot of photos and you have a use for that physical camera button, I think you're really going to like that.
I prefer that.
Yeah, it doesn't have any. All Windows phones. You correct me if I'm wrong, Foster, but I believe all Windows phones don't have any front physical buttons. So the iPhone, of course, has that one big button on the front.
Right.
Yeah, and so this is all just capacitive buttons or touch buttons that function just by touching them, not an actual physical button. So if that's a concern for you, you might want to check it out. Again, go into a Verizon store, whatever your carrier is, and just try out the different operating systems. It's hard we could talk all day about them, but it's hard to say one is absolutely better than the other because in the old days you might have been able to say that, but at this point they're kind of on even footing, and the hardware's gotten better. Everything's been getting better as more and more people have been using them. So we're seeing, as the competition has gotten better, we're seeing better and better phones. And you really got to try them out because they're all pretty good.
And when we're looking at the battle videos online, of I'm looking between this phone and that phone, and then they do the battle, whether CNET's doing it or somebody else. I mean, they're almost performing exactly the same, and it's coming down to the actual benchmark graph on which one you're going to buy, that sort of thing, because they're so close. And of course, the availability is something that we have to consider, too, because maybe it's not available for all carriers. So where can you get this phone?
The Icon is a Verizon exclusive, so it's $199 on Verizon.
Okay.
That's a contract price, of course.
And so, again, if you're not Verizon, you may want to consider jumping ship if you want a phone like this, or look at one of the other Nokia varieties that may be on your carrier, and that's because I think a couple of them are floating around in the other carriers too, right? Yeah, okay. So anything else that you guys wanted to add about this particular phone before we get out of here?
I think it's, again, try it out, try out different things, and I think that if you're looking for simplicity, I think it really competes with iOS. I've always said iOS is simpler than Android if you're just looking for something simple and gets done what you want to. Foster, would you agree with that? I think it really competes with iOS, and you're going to have to try it out.
It does, and if you're concerned about the lack of drop-down notification center, that's going to be added in a few months when 8.1 comes out for free. So it's going to be just like Android and iOS as far as that. And iOS just got that last year.
So could we be talking about maybe, if you're looking at a phone like this, you might be somebody who actually thinks a cell phone is a phone, but you just want the ability to take some really good pictures and some video and maybe record a good audio piece here and there, but really you want it as a phone.
Sure.
Yes.
So this would probably be that, instead of dealing with the marketplaces and the Apple Store and everything else where it might get a little confusing and you don't really care about any of that.
If you really care about pictures, that camera button is a two-phase button, so you can hold it down halfway to focus and then press the rest of the way.
Yeah, that's pretty unique.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons I was looking at this as possibly being my wife's next phone. And one of the things that she did like about my iPhone was the camera on it, because it does low light better than hers does, and she's still got the Galaxy S2, which she's ready to move on from. But so she's been looking for one that focuses more on the pictures, because she takes so many snapshots. Well, now she's a photographer, and people see the snapshots, and she's always concerned they're going to think the snapshots are really her doing photography, and it's not. And so she wants to make sure she can at least present herself properly with that. So,
and if you do video, it has 4 microphones, and it's unbelievable.
And see, I do video. See, I'm the video guy. She's the camera guy, but I'm also the audio guy, and that's what makes it really nice and appealing to me. But again, I'm the geek that likes to modify and tweak stuff, and I don't know that necessarily a Windows phone is going to be the best option to do that.
Right.
Now, you brought a little Bose speaker in here. Tell us a little bit about this. What's going on with this thing?
I did. So this is a Bose Bluetooth speaker. Verizon sent it along and asked me to review it along with the Icon. So it's pretty simple. Not a lot to it. Basically, just you can connect your to Bluetooth, which all smartphones, laptops, tablets, all that stuff has Bluetooth. And the audio quality is really, really good. It can get great sound, really loud. And you can also, if you don't want to use it for Bluetooth or you want to use either one, you can plug in an iPod or anything that uses a normal headphone jack into it as well. But it's called the SoundLink Mini, Bose SoundLink Mini, and a great little speaker.
Okay, about how much does that run? Do we know?
That is $199, and you can find links and more information on both this and the Icon on my website, jhanlon.net. There are links to more information. You can purchase them through Verizon there.
Very good. John, do appreciate it. Foster, thanks for coming along and kind of explaining your experience with Windows phones, because I know people are still in the dark about it and they want to learn. So we do appreciate the time, man.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
All right. Again, jhanlon.net. We've linked to him on our Facebook page, which, of course, you can get to by going to 953mnc.com. And I want to thank them for coming in and reviewing the Nokia Lumia Icon. We've got more coming up on News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.
Talk 95.3 MNC, Michiana's news channel. Casey Hendrickson.